Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wonderful World Building with Christine Lynn Herman, Rory Power, and Amanda Foody. I am so excited to be here with you all. I am Allison Carvalho, the events manager for Barbara's Bookstores, and I'm incredibly pumped about this event. Barbara's has been a Chicago institution since 1963, and we're so excited to be bringing you this virtual event. We are a family-owned and operated bookstore, and we pride ourselves on creating community spaces within our bookstores as well as out of them, like these events. Before we get to our discussion, I want to give you a quick tour of Crowdcast for those who haven't been here before. First of all, we are still new to virtual events. We've now hosted a few, but it's still something we're getting used to. So please bear with us if we're having any technical issues. If things tend to go sideways, just bear with us. We'll get things back up and running as quickly as we can. Please make sure to chat in the chat on the side with other book lovers. There will also be links and information about some of our upcoming events. If you happen to notice that your video is freezing or lagging, just make sure to click on the little gear that should be at the bottom of your screen and change your HD setting to 360. That tends to help with any lag that you might experience. The last 10 to 15 minutes of the event will be open for questions. So if you would like to ask a question to these incredible authors, please make sure to use the Ask a Question function, which is somewhere down there, probably around here. Click on that, and then you can ask a question. And then anyone who looks through those questions, you can upvote it by clicking on it. And the ones that get the most upvotes will be the ones that we ask. So it's a great way to interact with our authors. Alrighty. Oh, and the most important thing, if you click right down here, there's a little green button there. If you click on that, that is where you can purchase all the books by these incredible authors today. So if you click on that link, it will take you to the event page on Barbara's Bookstore. And if you scroll down a tiny bit, it will say to purchase this book, to purchase this book. So all you gotta do, click on that link, then click on the books that you're looking to get, and we'll be able to get them to you. And lastly, I want to say that we want these events to be a fun and informative space. So please make sure to be respectful and kind to your fellow book lovers in the chat and throughout the event. All right, I think that's everything. I am so excited to bring our first author. Our first author grew up in Boston and received her undergraduate degree at Middlebury College and went on to earn an MA in prose fiction from the University of East Anglia. Her books include New York Times bestseller Wilder Girls, as well as her latest work, Burn Our Bodies Down. Hailing from New England, I'd like to welcome to the screen, Rory Power. Hey, Rory, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Doing wonderful. It's so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
And for having Christine and Amanda. It's always a good time when we get to do an event. So
yes, for sure. And thank you so much. You were actually the one that suggested to bring them on, and I'm so excited that you did, because I
always going to make them hang out with me.
Oh, I know those feels. It's like, come on, we gotta hang out. So we're gonna do this thing over here, okay, girls? So let's go ahead. Let's start with your writing journey. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into writing?
Yeah, I have been, writing since I was a kid, which I think a lot of writers have that sort of initial spark when they're young. My mom is also a writer, so she kind of like showed me the way, and that it was a thing that was possible that you could do as like a job. But I took sort of a circuitous route through high school and college, took a lot of breaks from it. And then came back to it, got my master's, which you don't need grad school to do writing as a job by any means, but it was really helpful for me. I just needed that time to I needed expectations. I needed people to shame me into working, essentially. And yeah,
I feel that so hard.
I just need someone to be like, this is your job now, and if you don't do it, you get a B instead of an A, because that's like all I need to motivate. And yeah, after my master's, that was just really like the kick that I needed to get back into it, and I've been writing ever since.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about Burn Our Bodies Down. It was such a, I think the word that I can use to express it is engrossing. Like I felt like I got sucked into the world of it, and it was so fascinating to kind of get to know these characters. So tell everyone a little bit about the book.
Burn Our Bodies Down, which I have a copy of because you reminded us to have one, is like Sharp Objects by way of the X-Files. It's about a girl who has grown up with her mother, with just the two of them in a kind of complicated relationship, and then one day she finds sort of a door to the rest of her family and her past and her mom's past, and she ends up wishing that she had not found any of that. It's not a good time for anyone, but there's a lot of corn. It's set in Nebraska. I read a lot of USDA reports. Please make it worth it.
Amazing. So you have written 2 standalone books that they both take place kind of in isolation. And so a lot of your books, they have these like kind of smaller, more intimate settings, like a boarding school or obviously an isolated town in Nebraska. So like, where did like the specific impetus to talk about this kind of sense of isolation come from?
I think just on like a logistical level, it's easier that way because I don't have to deal with like big questions about like what's the rest of the world doing, because I don't really care about that, so I just keep it narrow. But also I think like when I think about the teenage experience as I went through it, it was really a lot of like being by yourself and trying to handle things by yourself, and maybe that's good, maybe that's like you should have asked for help, but that was what happened. So that's sort of the feeling that's most immediate to me when I go to write about that age.
For sure. No, I can totally see that. It kind of allows for a little bit more independence too, kind of in a way. It kind of forces independence versus having to think about any of those bigger questions. That's awesome. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead. We're going to move on to our next author, but we're going to be bringing you back in a little bit. So thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and bring our next author. Our next author was born in New York City, but raised around the world. She subscribes to the firm philosophy that home is where the books are. Currently, her books reside in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Her titles include her debut YA novel, The Devouring Grey, and its sequel, The Deck of Omens. Let's bring to the screen Christine Lynn Herman. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. So happy to be here supporting Rory.
Heck yeah, let's do this thing. So let's talk about your writing journey. So tell us a little bit about how you got to writing.
So as soon as Rory was like, I started writing at a young age, I was like, oh, you about to hear this 3 times in a row. Because I also did this. But I started writing pretty much like as soon as I learned how to read. And I knew I really wanted to do it professionally as soon as I realized like actual people wrote the books I was reading. But it's also, not the most practical of career paths. So I attempted to do other things while writing. I failed at doing other things, and I wound up being a creative writing major in college, which is not a very practical decision. But I did double minor in slightly more practical things like, history and international relations, which I think actually is kind of practical. For fantasy world
building. Elements there. I think so.
And then I wound up working in publishing after I graduated, while I was also writing and querying and stuff. And New York City was not for me, so I left. Now I'm here. That is the very abridged version, obviously, of a long story. But yeah, The Devouring Grey, my debut, was the 5th book I had written, but it was the first one I queried and stuff. So I feel like, all things considered, I actually had a pretty short writing journey. I know it's not actually that common to sign with the first project you query with, at least among my writer friends. So I feel really lucky that it was with a book I cared about so much.
Yes. So actually, that kind of segues into my next question, which is, tell us a little bit specifically about both books, kind of, because they are.
Yeah.
So Deck of Omens is the next one that's coming out, but tell us a little bit about the story of the world.
So The Deck of Omens, which I have here, came out at the end of April, and it's the sequel to The Devouring Grey, which is behind me somewhere. And this duology is about this small town in upstate New York where these teenagers come from these families that are supposed to protect their town from a monster that they're all tied to and that they get weird powers from. Because their ancestors made a really ill-advised bargain with said monster. And there's a lot of angst and multiple POVs and group cast stuff. It's very much the Raven cycle meets Claire Legrand's Sawkill Girls. And the sequel is more of the same shenanigans, but like this time there's actually kissing, because the amount of angry messages I got about there being no kissing in the first one.
Oh, the struggle. I feel like that's always kind of a thing, especially now. It's like the feedback loop of hearing about how people feel about your book has to happen so much faster now than it would have ever happened even like 10 years ago, you know?
Oh, yeah.
All that stuff. It's like next thing, like literally the next day, it's all of a sudden you get a deluge and you're like, oh, okay, this is where we're at. Like, all right then.
Yeah, I do feel lucky in that people have really enjoyed the sequel, which makes sense to me because I mean, it's a lot. It's just me doubling down on all the stuff in the first book. So I'm like, if you didn't like that, probably don't read this one. But if you did,
if you were on board, you're gonna be even more on board. So like,
yeah,
train.
He like really disgusting tree horror, but like also like bad jokes and teenagers making both good and bad decisions sometimes at the same time. Yeah.
So the books, obviously it's a duology, and so it's the first book and then a sequel. And so I was curious, what about this story lent itself to being a duology versus, I feel like a lot of book series these days, there'll be a trilogy or a quadruple G.
But I think it's quintet, but I'm not actually sure. Or quartet. Quintet would be 5.
Yeah, quartet versus a quintet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it when I first like came up with the idea in like 2015. God, I knew it was 2 books because even though there's a lot of POV characters, there are 5 teenagers in the main cast, and throughout the 2 books, they all get the chance to talk. But I knew also that it felt like 2 halves of a whole instead of like something bigger. And I didn't want to extend the story for the purposes of dragging out a plot that I knew I could resolve more quickly. I felt like people would maybe not get tired of it, but I would get tired of it. If I had to do it for too long, I was like, I'll just go out with a bang. I know how to do this in this amount of space. So I'm okay with that.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hopping on the screen with me for a second. We're going to go ahead and say bye to you for the moment, but we'll be bringing you back. Thank you so much. All right. Our next author has always considered imagination to be our best attempt at magic. After a double life as an accountant preparing taxes for multinational corporations, she now spends her free time brewing and fermenting foods, much more easily obtained at the local grocery store. She lives in Boston, Massachusetts, with a hoard of books guarded by the most vicious of feline companions, Jelly Bean. Her books include Daughter of the Burning City, the Shadow Game series, which includes Ace of Shades, King of Fools, and the final installment, Queen of Volts. Let's bring to the screen Amanda Foody. Hello, Amanda. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks for being patient and being up for being the last one of the trio.
No, it's relieving. Then I can just copy their answers.
Yeah, that's fair. Makes it real easy, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about your writing journey.
So, like the others have already said, I've wanted to be a writer since I was really, really young. In fact, I was kind of so much of a go-getter and a self-starter that I actually got into publishing and writing professionally, I think younger than most. But I still had a journey that I think is pretty classic, lots of rejections, lots of ups and downs. And yeah, pretty otherwise straightforward. I didn't major in creative writing or anything like that. I majored in accounting and English, I guess. And but I still was writing all through college. And yeah, I think a pretty otherwise straightforward publishing story.
I love that though, because I think there's definitely something to be said for like being able to apply other disciplines into how you write. So like I am 100% sure there has to be some element of that accounting history. And I mean, based on the Shadow Game series, there has to be at least a little.
Yeah. You're about to hear like probably later in this world building discussion how like I made up a whole series where magic is currency and I got to write about girls doing math. I found a way to sneak it in. Yeah.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about the Shadow Game series.
Yeah, so it's 3 books. I have 2 of them here. Got Ace of Shades, which is book 1, King of Fools, which is book 2, and Queen of Bolts, the 3rd book, comes out on September 1st. And it takes place in a city of sin, which is kind of like, it's supposed to be inspired by Atlantic City, which is kind of the East Coast beachy version of Las Vegas. And it's about a girl who's very, very kind of prim and proper from finishing school, who goes looking for her mother, who's gone missing in the city of sin. And she's teamed up with one of the city's most notorious car dealers in order to track her down. And the series follows these 2 characters, as well as all of their various associates, and the many shenanigans that follow in the course of their journey.
Yes. Oh, I love it. It's such a fun series. I really enjoyed kind of getting, it's a very cool world to kind of dive into. I'm really excited to talk about it.
Oh, thank you.
So you are releasing the 3rd book in your trilogy on September 1st, as you said. So how does it feel to kind of be able to finish out this trilogy? Because I imagine it was an incredibly long journey, because book publishing takes a really long time. So like,
it does.
How does it feel to kind of have this whole thing get to come together on September 1st?
I think the classic answer is that it's bittersweet. I adore these characters, and it's been a story that I've been a part of for so long. So, part of me is always going to miss it. But at the same time, it's really satisfying. I think that Ace of Shades, for pretty much the entire of my publishing career, has been the book for me. It was all of my original publishing milestones were Ace of Shades. It was my first agent, the first time I've been on submission. It was part of my first book deal. And so I think now that it's finally, the whole series is coming to a conclusion, it really does feel like I'm moving from a chapter 1 of my career onwards, which is both exciting and kind of nerve-wracking at the same time.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, congratulations on getting to finish the series. That's awesome. Alrighty, so I think it is time to bring everyone back up, and we'll do questions with everybody. So we'll get everyone back on screen. While they're doing that, make sure that if you have a question that you'd like to ask, please make sure to ask it in the Ask a Question function. And then that way we'll be able to share the question with these authors. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Yay. All right. So we're going to hop around a little bit and talk about a bunch of different things that have to do with world building. Because the big thing, I think, out of reading all of the books that you guys have written is that the worlds you guys created are just so defined, and they feel very real, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of dive into them. So I just want to dig a little bit into the process of creating that. So let's begin with, okay. So all of your worlds kind of have this sense of like mystery, and like there's tends to be a form of magic in some capacity. What was kind of the first thing that came to you? Was it the magic of the world? Was it like a location, or was it more like a character living in the world? What was kind of the thing that like kind of hooked you and helped you kind of be able to step back and see the world in a wider frame? Let's begin with Rory.
I always start with setting. That's what I have to have everything else click together. And I think, so I'll start with like, for Burn Our Bodies Down, I just really wanted to write about like a creepy abandoned farmhouse in a lot of tall corn. And it turned out that the farmhouse is not abandoned and the corn is like not that tall because it's dead, but we tried. And I just needed a reason to be there. So for me, that's where the characters come in. Like I need to figure out who would be there and whose eyes I can look through, and also like what is going wrong in their lives, which is where the mystery and or magic, which it may or may not be, comes in. So it really all just starts from like a location for me. But what about you guys?
For me, characters always come first, but that's, I think, because I need to know like who is mad, so I can be like, well, why are you mad? And then usually the where comes about. 3 of the 5 main characters showed up at the same time. That was interesting. The 4th one showed up like 3 days later. The 5th one took like a couple months. Thanks, Harper. But I knew almost immediately that I went to college in the same region of upstate New York that I set the book in, and I knew that I wanted to tell a story about that place because there's so much weird occultist history. There's actually and this is brought up in the book, but in the 1830s, 1840s, that part of upstate New York was called the burned over district because everybody was already part of a weird cult or something. So you'd have to go somewhere else if you wanted new members in your cult. Sorry. So I was like, wait, what if one of those cults worshipped a monster, a god, basically, that was real, and that their descendants were still dealing with the consequences of 150 plus years later? And then it kind of all spiraled from there. So yeah, I feel like for me, setting is almost always right behind a character when I think of an idea, and plot is a distant third.
For me, I would say the world. I had the setting first, a little bit of it at least, and then I usually right away, once I have the setting, I think of, well, who are my characters in relation to the setting? I knew when I started coming up with this world that the story was going to be a dual point of view story. There were going to be two characters narrating it. And so I decided right away that I wanted an insider character, somebody who was already in the know about the inner workings of the city of sin. And then I wanted an outsider character who could ask questions, and then I, as the author, could explain them and thus explain it to the reader. And so I then was thinking, well, okay, what is the most extreme version of an insider to the city of sin? And then who is the most extreme version of an outsider, which is how I got kind of the con man and finishing school girl stereotypes. And that was really fun. It provided good contrast into the setting and to the characters at the same time.
Yes.
I hope that you read in the chat where we had things to say about Levi.
The king of New Jersey.
The king of New Jersey. My absolute favorite descriptor of him.
Yes. So when you guys are thinking about kind of the worlds you're creating, do you guys create a vision board or anything like that? And how do you make your vision board? Are you Pinterest people? Are you cut things out of a magazine kind of life? Where are we at? Let's go ahead and ask Christine.
Definitely Pinterest boards. All my projects have them. The one for the Devouring Gray wound up at over 1,000 pins. That's
wait.
Yeah, it's 1,300 pins, and that's just for the Devouring Gray. The Deck of Omens has a separate one. I was very
That's a lot of pictures of trees.
How do you
and that?
How is it helpful? You just what is this?
Yes.
I like creepy tree pictures. Okay.
Yeah.
I could argue I wrote the book on creepy trees. A book anyway. There's a lot of them. So Pinterest, and I also really like making playlists. I can't listen to music while I write, but I like listening to music while I'm brainstorming and thinking about character arcs and stuff. And so every POV character had their own playlist, and all the couples had their own playlists, and the world, the overarching world, had a playlist. When I go in on something, I go all in. I don't do stuff halfway.
Hard.
Yeah, it was an all immersive experience. It felt like I would sit down and just sink into Four Paths, which is the town in the book. I took it very seriously. I still do, obviously, but I'm just amused because I got this idea when I was 20, and I was in my college dorm, not doing my paper that was due the next day because I was trying to figure out character arcs. I'm like, oh, honey, please do your homework.
Yes.
The playlists are good. I listened to the playlist when I was reading. Was it just the Deck of Omens? I think it was just the Deck of Omens.
Yeah, but you listened to
I
it
read
on
at the wrong
shuffle.
page. And
or
no,
something.
I listened to it in order, but I read at the wrong page. So I would hit the wrong scene at the wrong music, and it would be a very upbeat song while two kids are we're dying. And it was
Yeah.
so work on that.
You read really fast.
I think that's a good thing. I don't know. I do playlists too. I do Pinterest boards as well, but my Wilder Girls one hit 135 pins max, and then my Burner Bodies Down one also hit 135 pins, and now I'm I have to. That's something I can never use again. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Pinterest has its issues because of the images are never credited properly, and they are stolen from somewhere, but like also I love it. So that's the moral quandary that I wrestle with on the daily.
It's definitely a problematic fate. Bit of a problematic fate for sure.
I also do Pinterest boards. I don't really know how long they are. They're not as long as Christine's. I really curate them. I regularly go through and like purge if it doesn't work anymore, if a particular pin no longer fits. I also really love book playlists. I typically just do like one playlist. It's kind of just every song. But then I also make an 80s version of all of my book playlists. That's just like classic 80s rock, which is why Rory doesn't let me pick the playlist when we drive. I really like that.
I was gonna say I support it because I imagine that it adds like an automatic lens. Like it's almost like putting an Instagram filter on a playlist.
Oh, absolutely.
Like all of a sudden you like are hearing everything through like a certain lens. That is so fascinating.
I have they're really different vibes. My like general actual book playlist and then my 80s book playlist. But I'm a chaotic neutral, Rory.
No, there's an 80s version is like pure evil. That is pure evil.
Amanda loves 80s music. Wasn't it one of like your top 5 Spotify genres of last year?
Top 5.
You do not want to bring
it was like number 2.
You promised never to talk about my Spotify results.
I'm just saying.
Do you want to end our friendship on live stream?
We have it recorded for posterity, but I'll leave it for you.
I was gonna say, this is being recorded. Just remember that, y'all.
Basically, yeah, she has something I think more embarrassing than my maybe 80s rock being my top like my 3rd most listened to Spotify genre. That's fine. But yes, I love all those things. Book playlists, Pinterest boards, like they're all fun. If it's fun and like dorky about my own books, like I want to do it.
Right, then we're on board. All right, so let's talk a little bit about atmosphere. So all of your books take place in like very different locales. We have like middle of Nebraska's tiny farming town. We have otherworldly, gangster-filled like Atlantic City vibes. And then we also have upstate New York with mysterious woods, like that whole situation. So like how much research did you guys put into like once you had that concept down and you knew the look, how much research did you do? Or was there anything interesting about the research that you did to like help fill out that world? Let's go ahead and start with Amanda.
Okay. I will admit, I don't really love doing research, but I did do some research before I wrote Ace of Shades. I did a lot of research into organized crime history, specifically the organized crime of the early 20th century on the East Coast. I actually like took that even a step further. And when I got to college my freshman year, because I wrote Ace when I was in high school, so I was still working on it my freshman year, and I took a whole class entirely devoted to the mafia. Which comes up in the book, but it's only one little element of the story, but it was really, really interesting. Like for instance, I think maybe one little thing that I drew from research, one of the families in the book, one of the crime families, they have a magical power called omertas. And an omerta is actually a real term. It's actually the oath of silence that the mafia takes to not speak about their bad things that they're doing. And so I created that into being like a magical power in the story. But other than that, most of my research was just like, was this thing invented yet? And then Google would be like, no, that I could not include it. That was usually what I did.
I also like doing the like bare minimum with research where it's like, I'll write as much as I can. And then if I hit a question, I mark it for later and just keep going. And that way I only have to look up what I actively need to know. But yeah, I messaged Christine earlier today where I was like, hang on, I have to go touch some ice for research. That's about like
and then you're like, it's cold.
Like, there we go. I did it. I do, for the like sciencey aspects of my books, I do a lot of research with that, but I usually only end up doing that near the end of the book because I don't really know like what I'm doing with it until I get to the end, and then I know like which questions I actually have to answer and which are not that important.
Yeah, I like to do research and then use none of it. or almost none of it. I do so much research that I wind up not using. I have like a problem. It's because I'll do research into this thing that I think I need in the story, and then I'll learn enough about it to be like, oh, I can make up a fake fantasy thing because I use magic in my books, and that is way better than understanding the like underground hydraulics of a plumbing system or whatever. That's something I did last week. Yeah. And then like, I wasted 5 hours on this. I drew schematics. I'm such a nerd, but I also really like doing research into things that have always interested me anyway, because obviously I tend to write books and things that I'm interested in. So like I've been doing a lot of research on bugs lately for something. I've been doing a lot of research on like the climate change history of Long Island, a lot of research into 70s architecture, like stuff that like is kind of random when you say it like that, but it all makes sense in context. But I usually have to write at least, I'll always do pre-research, write a draft and be like, why did I do that? I usually, like, I'm starting to learn I have to write at least one draft of something to understand what I actually need to learn, because otherwise I waste my time. But I don't think it will stop me just yet.
Yeah, that's
Christine,
fair.
like, reads books, whereas I go stick my finger in the freezer and I'm like, cool, did it.
I do. I also use all my younger siblings like subscriptions to JSTOR so I can read scholarly articles and stuff and make up my own. It's fine.
Well, I think too, there's something to be said for like when you do research, even if it's not something you're going to use right now, there's always something that like weirdly sticks in the back of your mind, and then you're able to like put it somewhere else at some point, hopefully. And then it feels
I support this, even if it's fake. I choose to believe that's true.
Right. That's like, I love to write. And when I'm trying to write, like, that's always where I'm like, okay, cool. I just spent like 3 hours researching this thing I'm really not using. It's fine. I'll use it later. At some point, it'll happen, right? It's like you can convince yourself of everything at the end of the day. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about kind of like maps, because I know some of your books have maps in them, some of them don't. But did you at any point like draw your own map of the world that you were in and kind of figure out where stuff was to like help you contextualize locations? Was any of that kind of play a role into your writing? Let's begin with Rory.
Yeah, I do a lot of maps. My books are set in like Earth. Yours are too, Christine. So like, and Foodie, you pull from Elating City a lot, but like I would be on Street View and Google Maps a lot, like making sure that I have a really good sense of where I am. And I do sketch out a map of like the fictional aspects of things. For Burn Our Bodies Down, it was really just like, there's a road, and there's a house, and then there's a house. But I kept drawing that over and over when I got stuck, because like I thought maybe the secret was in there, and I'd be like, this is north, this is south. Has anything changed? And nothing ever changed. Yeah, I do a lot of mapping, a lot of doodling, a lot of compass roses that are not any help. And yeah, I wish Burn Our Bodies Down had a map in it, but it would be not very helpful at all because there's not a lot going on.
Well, and it's all kind of spread out. I mean, it's a small town, but like it would be like it would be like a big blank space with like a couple of roads.
It would just be like, yeah, there's a field there. Like, you don't need to know that. You can just imagine.
Figure it out.
I have a map that I drew of my book because it's actually really important to the plot where some stuff is, like the whole shape of the town, because of the way the world building works and where like people's houses and stuff are, wound up being really important. So I kind of snuck a map into the book with a symbolism. They just don't understand that's what they're looking at for a long time. And I had a lot of fun drawing a map to correspond with that for my own personal reference. But I also definitely like just was like, here are some houses. I don't care where anybody else lives. So we're just going to say woods are here. Which is why it's probably good there wasn't a map in the book, because it would have been totally useless. Like people would be like, wait, but where do the other thousands of people in this town live? And I was like, in the woods. Probably.
Is there a municipal department? No.
No. I also didn't have to, for all my like big talk about research on the last question, I don't ever really have to do place research because I just put them where I'm living. So like I was living in upstate New York when I wrote the book, and then I just based it on like an amalgamation of places I visited while I was there. And then my next contempt fantasy is on Long Island, where my family grew up, lives, and where I kind of grew up. And then my third contempt fantasy, hopefully, will be in Boston, so where I live now. So I just very like, I know what to do. I can walk outside, and then I'm doing research.
Taking all that stuff out.
So all the books I actually can show one. That's the thing I can do. All the books in the Shadow Game series have maps. All the maps are slightly altered to suit the content of that specific book, but they're city maps that look kind of like this. I'm not gonna lie, I have a pretty good sense of direction, and I kind of just knew everything was in my head. And then eventually my publisher was like, we want to include a map, like, can you draw a map? And then I actually formally drew it out. And it was really, really fun because I feel like most fantasy maps are obviously like worlds or like some sort of continent. And instead I got to like label all the neighborhoods in the city and the river and the streets, and there are like subway stations and like all this really cool stuff that I thought was really fun to include in a city map. It's actually supposed to be in the book. The female character N has this tourist guidebook that she brings with her to the city of Sin. And there's a map in it. And so the map in the series is like kind of supposed to be the map from the guidebook as well, which was kind of a fun little thing to include. I love like fake books in books. I have like a thing for it.
We both have a thing about that.
Yeah, my middle grade book has a glossary that's like also from a fake book in the book.
Yes. Oh, I love it. It's very meta. I enjoy that very much. So, okay, I want to talk about magic a little bit. And when I say magic, I mean in whatever capacity that there's an otherworldly aspect to the book, in whatever capacity that could mean, because I don't want any spoilers for anybody. But what was your kind of approach to thinking about kind of the within your book, and or is there, if you're worried about spoilers, is there a favorite aspect of it that was like fun to write, or something about it that like really kind of got juices flowing? Let's go ahead and start with Christine.
So I world build magic from character usually, because I like thinking about the way that, because like, you know, when you're writing YA, you're often writing about experiencing things for the first time and about like coming of age, and there's something about discovering like magical abilities or the way those can manifest that I think can tell you a lot about a person. It's a way to deepen and change character development. So it was really important to me that I think about why everybody had the abilities they did and how that would shape them. So I kind of sat down with each character to like think about that for a while I was figuring it out. The 4 families in the town each have a different kind of power, which meant I had to develop 4 magic systems and 4 subcultures around each type of magic, which was super fun and definitely a great idea that I would totally do again. No, I mean, it was very fun in some ways and very hard in other ways. I had like all of this like meta stuff that never made it into the books, of me just trying to like understand exactly what the limitations of the abilities were, even though the characters didn't know, so that I could figure stuff out to make it consistent. I also really enjoyed theming like the way that, like, for example, one of the families, the Hawthorns, their powers are all based around like reading people and influencing like others. And so their like symbol, each of the 4 families has like a symbol. Their symbol are like the branches, but it's actually because like their roots are like under the town in everything. And I had a lot of fun playing with that too. But I also think it took a lot of, I think it took years for me to fully refine that magic system. And like when you're writing under contract, you don't often have as much time. And so I wonder, looking back, if I had known how quickly I would have to write the sequel in comparison to the first book, if I would have been as complicated. Like, I'm really, really proud of the deck of omens. I'm really happy with everything I did, but I also spent a lot of time trying to finagle different world building elements together in like varying rounds of edits and just like lying on the floor. Literally.
2 families only in the next book. 2 families.
2 people. Only 2 people. No more
That's
people.
my goal. You know my goal is to write a book about
I know.
a character.
I'm aware.
Yeah, for the like sciencey, otherworldly bits in my book, I think the most fun I have is trying to find something that's going to play in thematically with what's going on for the characters, and having that speculative element reflect in a very like a larger metaphorical sense what's happening to them, because I love to do just like obnoxious metaphors that are really obvious by the end. I won't say what it is for Burn Our Bodies Down because that's a little bit of a spoiler, I guess. But I just liked but I use that to help narrow my research and like find things that are 70% real, and then add that last 30% that's like completely fake science. But it's always more than half real. I'll say that.
I think that's the scariest part.
Huh.
The scariest part of your books is that they take real stuff and they twist it just a little bit into something absolutely terrifying.
30%.
A little bit. Just a smidgen.
So for me, I really spend a lot of time thinking philosophically about magic and magic systems. I've always kind of found that even though magic is kind of meant to be anything unexplained, in the fantasy genre, we actually have a really narrow set of like expectations for what we think magic is. And so I'm just always really, really hungry for stories that play with weird magic systems and that reimagine magic to be something else, because that makes it kind of that much more magical to me. So when I started writing the Shadow Game series, I wanted the magic to be the currency. And it was from that notion that I truly, everything else in the world kind of steamrolled from there. I thought, magic as currency. And then I was thinking, oh, well, then what if I had like basically a magical investment scheme, a magical Ponzi scheme? And that's a crime. So what about if crime was like infested this whole world? Then it's going to be a city of sin. And it kind of just goes from there. So yeah, basically in the world, magic is currency. Magic is also a power that is passed down in your family. And every family in the world has their own abilities, and they kind of range. Some of them are more magical than others. Others are actually kind of mundane. And the reason that it's currency is that it actually derives from a specific group of people who do have that power. So it all ties in together. But yeah, I'm someone who really, really loves magic systems, and I love that kind of a little bit of the weird, but at the same time, I want something that's familiar. And when I was writing the Shadow Game series, kind of both in the magic system and additionally in the setting itself, which I really wanted to do something that isn't medieval, because I think that's also something with high fantasy. We really think of it as like medieval England, which is really, really tired. And so I wanted a different era. I wanted a weird magic system. I wanted it to be weird without being like too weird. That was kind of always my mentality: weird without too weird. And that's what draws me into stories, and that's kind of how I got going with the story, and then the setting, and then the characters. It all just kind of came from that one initial idea. Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay. So when we're talking about all of your books, the one thing I feel like that is, it's common, I think it's common in a lot of, lots of books in general, but I think especially in YA, is kind of like lies and secrets. All of your books have very heavy emphasis on like kind of like the secrets and lies within the world. And there's kind of a varying degree of knowledge amongst all of your characters. Some characters know exactly how the world works, and some characters have no idea what's going on, and they're just kind of jumping in and kind of trying to figure out how to function. So how did you work on figuring out like where to leave the breadcrumbs? Because as readers, we are discovering this world alongside your characters that kind of don't know what's going on. So like, how do you decide how to leave behind those breadcrumbs so that the reader can kind of follow along and know what's going on? Let's begin with Amanda.
Okay. I will admit this is a very tricky question. And I wish I had like a great answer for it. I feel like that kind of like is the source of almost every revision to every book I've written, is making it that much clearer or that much more exciting. I would say that for me, the Shadow Game series is split into, it's 3 books, it's a trilogy. And though I didn't really have a huge idea of absolutely everything that was in the series, I didn't have it plotted out down to its specific details. I knew what the climax of book 1 and 2 was. I knew what the vibe of every book was. And so there are certain things that I knew to seed in the beginning. That actually, I would say one of my favorite tools for breadcrumbing is writing multiple characters telling the story. Because in the first book, it's just the 2 characters. It's just Anne and Levi. And then in book 2, there's 3. And then in book 3, there's 5. And so by expanding the story, it wasn't necessarily just that Anne and Levi are getting more breadcrumbs. It's actually these new characters are coming into the fold who have their own perspectives or on the world or the plot. Without giving spoilers, in Queen of Bolts, actually one of the characters who is one of the point of view characters is one of the antagonists from the rest of the story. And so they're actually the only character who the entire time has known the full picture in a way that for the rest of the series, Anne and Levi and the rest of the cast has not seen the whole picture. And so I think having multiple characters is really fun. I just love having different vantage points. I love, especially not just for plot and world building, but also for the sake of character. Nothing like makes me more like excited and interested in a story when you find out that one character that the reader is probably the reader's favorite is maybe through the perspective of somebody else, not quite as good of a person as you might have originally thought. Yes, so I guess that's my answer. Many characters, which has its own pitfalls.
Who wants to go next?
Go.
The thing is that like I'm not very good at this. Okay, so I try really hard to understand fully what's going on because it's a series, right? And I knew when I was writing the first book what like the big twist was in the second book, and so there are hints simply because I knew, and I'm not good at keeping secrets in real life. But I also, it's really hard when you have a bunch of POV characters that all know varying things and you don't want to bore the reader by having them be like, well, I already know this stuff and she doesn't know it yet. But you also don't want to then go too far in the other direction and be like, well, this character would realistically know this thing, but I'm only withholding the information so that the reader doesn't get spoiled for something. So ultimately, I decided to err on the side of readers are smart and readers can also yell at the page when they know something a character doesn't. And that is actually like, it's not a spoiler if it's world building information that a character would reasonably know. If I took that out, it would hurt the character. And through that and through the varying amounts of knowledge that the POV characters had, I was actually able to set up a lot of inconsistencies in the mythology that they all thought were true, which meant I knew the readers would pick up on the fact that they were being all of the characters are being lied to in a big way. And I knew that they would eventually get to the place where when the big reveal came, it would surprise everybody. So building on the fact that I knew there was one big thing that nobody knew, I felt like I was okay sharing littler things that some characters knew and some didn't know.
For sure.
I love hearing you guys talk about your process in the books you write because like you guys both write multi-point of view casts and like have written series and I write one person in one book and like that's it. So like managing information is I think there are tricky things when you have many people and there are tricky things when you only have one. And for me, the solution when I only have one person doing all of it is making sure that they care about something very specific so that anything I don't want them to know yet can just be something that they would never like have a reason to want to find out. So for Wild the Rose, for instance, the main character is really just like, she wants to get her friend back. And so there's all this like big world building stuff going around her. And she's like, yeah, I don't care. Like I'm looking for one thing. So I don't have to worry about that. And it works for me. I think the tricky thing there is making sure it's not too frustrating for a reader. But for Burn Nobody's Down, for instance, it was tough because it's a really like it's a thriller book, it's a mystery, there's stuff that you want to find out, but it's through the point of view of someone who has grown up in an emotionally abusive household. So she's been like conditioned not to ask questions and to just take things as they are, because she feels that if she does ask questions, things could go really wrong. So it was like balancing her natural instinct to just accept things with the reader being like, okay, but I need to know some stuff like now. So figuring out what she would care about enough to break through that established behavior, that was really what helped me figure out like, oh, okay, so now is where she would have like gone through enough that she'd be like, okay, I've hit the end of my rope. Like, I need to ask questions.
I need to know. Yes. Alrighty. Well, we are pretty much, I have one last question before we move on to our audience question portion. So if you have a question you want to ask, now is a great time to pop it in there. My last question for all of you is, do you have any recommendations for any books that have great world building that you're super supportive of? And I want to also mention that, and I forgot to mention this to all of you guys, if you could do me a favor and email me the books you recommend, and then what I'm going to do is I can make like a cute little graphic that we can share of all of the books that you recommend, and then I'll make sure to send it to you guys. Sorry I didn't tell you earlier, but if you could email it to me, that would be great.
Yeah,
of course.
We will do that.
I can go first, I guess. I would recommend The Bells. I spent a lot of time talking about how much I like weird magic systems, and the magic in this book is beauty, which is like just my type of like, that's super cool, that's super weird. So, and I loved everything about the book too. So I highly recommend this one.
I guess I can go next. Okay, I highly recommend Song of Wraiths and Ruin. Oh my gosh. As Amanda mentioned, a lot of fantasy uses medieval Europe as the default setting. And this book, West African setting, amazing court intrigue, fantastic characters, and truly a world building system unlike anything I've read in YA before. And I feel like if I say anything else, I'll be spoiling it. But if you love young adult fantasy or adult fantasy, or if you just like good books, you should really read this one.
And I'm going to go with a non-fantasy, Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. It is sort of like The Secret History meets Never Let Me Go. The world building really focuses on this one like elite university, and you're at this one house the whole time. It's super like weird and dreamy and creepy, and they let me blurb it. They let me put my name on there. That's so cool. It's so good. It's so good, and you just feel like completely like hemmed in by this house, and it feels so tangible, but at the same time there's this like film between you and it. It's so good. It's so good. Read it.
Yes. I love that. Alrighty.
Also,
well,
I recommend both of their books for good world building. I know it's corny.
Gross. All right.
Supporting friends. Support. Take it in. Alrighty. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna answer a couple of these questions because we're almost at the end of our time. I cannot believe this hour is almost up already. Let me see. Try to pick a good one. Okay. So this one had the most votes. So what is the hardest part of the writing process? We'll popcorn this one. So whoever wants to go.
All of it? I don't know.
I agree with Rory. What are you currently doing?
Literally the whole thing.
I think right now, I think revising is very difficult. I do not like it at all. I think that, wow, that's a lot of thinking. I feel that way even when I'm revising and even when I'm drafting. So that's my opinion. I'm sticking by it. Mm-hmm.
I agree with Rory. I think revising is the most difficult. However, it is not my least favorite. Anything that is in the vein of copy edits is true drudgery, in my opinion. True of this, like, just a horrible
I like copy edits.
They're so satisfying.
I don't care how anything is spelled in my novels, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. I beta read your books, and all my notes are just me spelling things right. I'm like, this is brilliant, but you don't know how to spell this word.
It's like 2 weeks of my life devoted to how I feel about commas, and it's not for me.
You comma splice? Like I know grammar. If you comma splice, when you use
I don't even know what that means.
Separate two independent clauses, and you shouldn't be doing that, Amanda. Like, I know grammar is a construct.
I don't even. I probably don't do that. I don't know.
Where are your eyes?
I hate comma splices so much. I hate them. Anyway.
The pain and suffering of a comma splice. Alrighty. So our next question is balancing realism and magic in the settings of your books. So find kind of that balancing act. What is your method for kind of balancing it?
Make them be sad about everything. No, but seriously, if you give them problems in the real world and problems that are non-magical and problems that are magical, then they'll organically just have to solve both of them.
Yes.
I haven't figured out the balance thing. I regularly get tagged in like, not reviews, but like, because once you read it, you obviously realize that's not the case, but like, this book is set in Las Vegas. And I'm like, okay. I haven't really figured out like at what point the weird becomes confusing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I want to mention that I forgot to mention who asked these questions. I'm so sorry. So Emma asked the hardest part of writing question, and Daniela asked about the approaching balancing realism and magic.
I agree with what Christine said. I think if they serve each other, that helps like keep it from going too far out of whack. But I think there's always going to be just a little bit of like one or the other that's a little bit more prominent.
Yes. All right. This question is from Kat, and I really, really like this question. What's harder to write for you, magic that helps or magic that hurts?
I mean, personally, I'm unfamiliar with the concept of magic that helps, so I don't have any of that in my books.
I was about to say literally all magic does in my books is make my characters' lives more difficult. Even if you think it would make it better.
Well, as the endearing middle grade author of the group, I like both. I think that magic that hurts is easier to write. I have absolutely no reason as to why. I guess because I'm a lawful evil. I don't know. But I swear I have written both.
I'm glad you've accepted your destiny and your D&D alignment.
All right. So this question comes from Alex. And this is definitely a question that is definitely an inside joke, but I'm letting it happen because I appreciate it. Whose pet would survive best in whose book?
The answer is Jellybean and absolutely none of them. I've only met Scallion very briefly before this event, and I can already tell that Jellybean would lose in that fight. And
wait, but it's not about our pets fighting each other, though. It's about how they would do in each other's books.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Jellybean would do. I feel like she has an advantage because people are going to just be nice to her because they're like, this is a very small thing. Who needs my help?
Okay.
So.
All right. I have it. My middle grade book, which is literally about magical creatures. Jellybean would do okay there. I don't think he would be a good street cat on the City of Sin. I don't really see that.
No. I
think he'd be eaten by your beast.
Yeah. Nova would do fabulously at Rackster being a mutant cat and eating things that she's not supposed to eat. She would have a grand old time. She'd be like, a disease? Sign me up. Forget the bear. She would eat the bear. My cat is really food motivated and has been known to stage elaborate heists for said food. So I think she would be very happy about anything that made it easier for her to devour things.
Yes. All right. I think we have time. We're going to do one more quick. Well, this question's not quite. We'll see how quick it is. Do you have any advice on weaving magic or other worldliness into your story without it sounding like exposition? This question is from Jamie.
I think go for it as much as you like, and then cut it back by like half, and then cut it back by half again, and then add in like 3 more words. It's a very specific formula. But like, you get what I mean. Like, take it back, and then just like a little bit more.
And I do think it's important to over-explain it at first. You've got to explain it to yourself, and then you can pare it down after you do that. So don't feel bad about having a super exposition-heavy draft. Use other opinions like beta readers, or eventually, if you want to pursue publication, like an agent or an editor, to help you figure out what you need and what you don't. It's hard to see the forest for the trees sometimes. That was really on brand. But
I was gonna say, word joke much? Like,
I would say my advice is, I agree with both their advice too, but also when you do write the exposition, it should be the character telling the reader about the world and not you telling the reader about the world. Mm-hmm. That always helps me. Then it's interesting.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. That's such great advice. Thank you. Thank you all for so much. This has been such a fun conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for hosting it. Yeah.
Of course. Alrighty. So I'm going to do my last little spiel. But before I do that, can you please tell everyone your social media handles or where people can follow you to find out more about the books that you're writing and what you guys got going on?
Yeah, I'm at It's Rory Power everywhere. Twitter and Instagram mostly.
I'm at Christine Exists, one word, so I guess we're literal today.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Both of them are at Amanda Foody, just my name.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. I feel like everyone here has learned a lot about world building, and getting to hear about your books has been incredibly exciting. Please make sure that if you want to read these incredible books, that you go to that green button right down there and you click on it and purchase some of these awesome books. Specifically, I will say that pretty much all the books are available, except, of course, for Queen of Volts. That book is on pre-order and will be available on September 1st. And then we also have book plates for all of these books as well. So if you want a signed copy of these books, if you order through that link, we will be able to send you a book plate with your book, which means you'll have a signed copy, which is incredibly exciting. We hope to see you here again for one of our other amazing events. In August, we'll be celebrating everyone going back to school in whatever way that we can with our Get Schooled series, which will feature exciting middle grade and YA authors. On August 17th, we'll be discussing diversity in middle grade with Muse Squad author Chantel Acevedo. And then on August 19th, we'll be hosting a panel on mental health in YA, which I think is going to be a really fascinating and important discussion. And make sure to don't forget to also check out our Instagram and our Facebook and our events page, where we'll be talking about other events we host, like Buzzwords Trivia, which is our bi-weekly trivia night, and our new inclusive book club called Culture Exposure, where we'll be discussing books written by authors representing a wide range of marginalized communities. Our first one is on August 26th at 7 p.m. and features the short story collection Octavia's Brood, Short Stories for Social Justice. So please make sure to check that out. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, wonderful authors, for being here. And we hope to see you soon. Happy reading, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.